Hi, teachers. As we take a look at the assessment options available within HMH Into Reading, our last stop is actually in creating your own assessments or tweaking those assessments that are already out there. As we take a look at our last option available for HMH Into Reading assessment, we're going to dive into creating your own assessments within the Into Reading HMH Ed platform. To get started, we're going to want to select Discover and then My Stuff. And here is where I will be able to create my own assessments. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to create an assessment using materials that are already provided within HMH. To do this, I'm going to select Create. I'm going to give my assessment a name. I can give it a description if I want to add further details. Maybe I know that this one is going to assess character and setting. And then I'm going to select Create. Now, once I'm here, I'm going to select Add Items, and I can then peruse all of the different assessments that are already within the program that are digital. So I can look at program level assessments, like the interactive early reader. I've got leveled reader quizzes that I can add to here. I can go into Module 1 and I can go into that module assessment. And then I can look at each of these items and I can add any of these items that I might want to add to my assessment. So do keep in mind if when you're adding questions, like I am not seeing at the moment anything that really ties to character settings, but let's say my whole assessment was on central idea. I can add this question, but then if I find another question about central idea on another passage, students might have a lot of passages to read for just a few questions. So you may want to add a couple of questions for that passage so that it's not solely just that one question per passage. So you can show any of these at any point. I can see the passage on the left. On the right, I can see the question. I can see the options students would have to have that read aloud. I'm going to select Add. So I'm going to just pick some random things at the moment to add to my assessment and then select Save and Done. Now, because it's such a large collection of assessment options, some work that I might want to do ahead of time if I'm really looking at building and perhaps then using my own assessments going forward in the future is I might want to print out some of those answer keys for the weekly and module assessments so that I can kind of see what skills Into Reading is saying that those different assessments are addressing. That can help me know where I need to go for questions. If I'm looking at assessing mastery for several standards that I have been teaching, you'll notice once I have them added to my assessment here, I can reorder the questions. I can click the three dots to edit the question further. Now, do be aware of this note here. Your item will be marked with the same standards as the original item. So you can't see the standard here right now, but in the reports option, when students take assessments within Into Reading, it's linked to specific standards to kind of give you some pinpoint details about where students might need some more support. So do be aware if I completely change this question from author's purpose to something else, while I definitely can do that, the validity of that standards report would be compromised. So just keep that in mind. Maybe you're not using that standards report, and so you're going to go tweak some of those things. Unfortunately, at this moment, you aren't able to relabel the question with another standard. However, you may find sometimes with some of the questions, just like in any assessment, you're kind of scratching your head on the way that they worded things. So the fact that you can go in and edit and tweak things with wording that you feel is appropriate for your students is another great option. I can open the passage here as well. So that's how I can pull from that entire bank, add questions, rearrange questions, and edit any of those questions. Now I want to talk about adding your own questions to that particular assessment. So what we're going to do is go into My Items. My Items is where you create individual questions. So I can select my discipline, and then I have 4 different kinds of questions that I can do. I want to do a match list, and maybe I want to do something with my vocabulary here and then provide students the answers here down at the bottom. So you can rearrange things how you want here. You can preview them exactly how students would see them. And then once you have that item created, it will become an item in this giant list of my items. If you go back to my assessments, when you're in one of your assessments and you go to add items, you can select to add things from my items and you will see your items here and you can add those questions from your items there. Now, once I have my whole assessment built and I like the way things are looking, we'll go back to my assessments. I can then click on that assessment. We'll click on this one that has 2 items, and I have some different options. I can duplicate it and then create maybe a second version of it if I want to do that. I can assign it directly to my students with the same assign template that we had before. If you don't have that assign option available, chances are you need to go into My Classes, find your class, select Program Settings, and then from the Program Settings list, choose whichever grade levels you need. We'll go back to my assessments, back to that particular assessment that I was on. So we talked about assign. Share is how you share this with your colleagues. Now, keep in mind the way that HMH works is when you share it with your colleagues, they then have to make a copy of it in order to use it on their own. So they're never going to interrupt your original. So do be aware that you don't need to create a whole bunch of copies just to share with other people. And then lastly, you can preview that assessment and see what it would look like before you would give it to students. So this will allow you some of that customization ability, especially if you're looking at using those weekly or module assessments and they're not quite jiving with some of the skills that you have been teaching. Maybe you haven't been doing all the skills that HMH has listed or you've tweaked things. So that way you can still use some of those passages and then add your own questions to those passages as well.